Hello everybody, welcome to this week's episode of The County Seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. You know, October has been a pretty rough month with a partial government shutdown, the first since 1996. Almost every community has felt some impact from the closure of certain government offices and services. However, in communities where you have a large number of federal workers or a large amount of public federal land, the sting has been felt more acutely. But the communities where you have both a lot of government workers and federal land, well, that impact has been devastating. Here in Utah, we had the makings of a perfect storm, where 67% of the state is owned and operated by the federal government. The problem here came with the shutdown of all of the management agencies that are in charge of that 67% of the state. The result, businesses which rely on access to public land, like mineral mining and drilling operations, now have their hands tied as the exploration process has come to a complete halt. But more notably, the 5 national parks, 8 monuments, and 2 recreation areas that lie within our boundaries were off limits to the thousands of daily visitors from all around the world who traveled here to marvel at them.
We're right in the middle of this, and closing all the national parks around us is equivalent to if you went on a vacation to China and they'd close the Great Wall and the Terracotta Warriors and the Yangtze River. You know, it would kind of change your experience of what you anticipated.
Everyone is really upset and angry, and quite frankly, it's embarrassing to say, you know, I'm sorry, our government won't let us see these parks that are so gorgeous. Frankly, it's ridiculous.
On Friday, October 11th, the state of Utah reached an agreement with the Department of Interior to loan the federal government the money to reopen the national parks that were closed in order to stop the disastrous impacts that closing the parks had on our local economies. Tourism in Utah is a $7.4 billion industry, with about 72% of those dollars coming from outside the state. When the national parks were shut down, there was an impact on the businesses that serve those visitors. But the impacts went beyond the tourist industry. There are the federal workers who live in nearby communities. Then there are the local jobs that support those people. The trickle-down impacts eventually end up far from the closed gates on national parks. One would reason that this is not the peak of tourist season, so these businesses should be fine. Well, not exactly. While the national parks are usually open year-round, the tourism season is not.
It's causing problems. This is our livelihood. This is our jobs, and it wasn't supposed to be done yet. Our season isn't done yet.
October is kind of what I call our winter money month. We spend the rest of summer paying the bills, and then whatever we can make in October, we try to squirrel some of that away, you know, to help us get through the winter. This week alone, Sunday, I had 13 cancellations for the week. People that were going to come and didn't come, or were going to come and spend 2 or 3 days, only come and spend one night.
There has been a big difference with having the park closed. There's not as many people milling around. People are changing their plans, and it has affected a lot of the businesses in town, as well as further down in Laverkin and Hurricane as well.
So we have 6 months positive cash flow, 6 months negative cash flow. So October is such an important month to get us through those winter months when things are lean around here.
When you see a 20% drop in revenue because of a federal action, it causes a ripple effect on everything.
The visitors who planned their dream trip are also affected.
I'm trying to explain to them what's going on and to try to, you know, they're so devastated that they can't see the national parks. You know, for a lot of them, this is a bucket list item. It's something they've saved their entire lives to do, and it's just absolutely devastating that we have to tell them that they can't see the park.
I'm not sure how we're going to recover from the loss of confidence that some of the tour operators and those that are going to be booking future trips have, if we don't have the ability to show them that our parks are going to be open no matter what when they get there.
So far, we have examined the damage caused by the shutdown of the national parks and the impact it's had on the communities that surround them. That sets the stage for us to explore the process by which the counties got together with the state to develop a plan of action. Now, this was not just a goal they were reaching for, it was a need that had to be met immediately. How did they do it? Well, we'll take a look at that when we come back. You're watching The County Seat.
What brings you to St. George?
Business meeting.
Staying long?
Just here for the day. Quick in and out. Hey, I just landed. Can we meet in a half an hour?
Oh, too bad. Why so fast?
Stay any longer? We'll run out of things to do. On second thought. Buddy, something's come up. I'm gonna need another hour. Can we push the meeting till noon? I am definitely gonna need to reschedule. Holy.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy your 45-minute flight to Salt Lake. How'd that meeting go?
I should have booked a weekend.
There's no need to travel far to find that perfect family adventure. Welcome to Utah's Nebo Loop Scenic Byway. 38 miles of winding highway through the southern end of the Wasatch Mountains. Join us in Juad County. It'll change your family forever.
Almost 45% of the oil produced in Utah, 7.8 million barrels, comes from Duchesne County. That oil feeds our state economy, provides job growth, and supports local business. Here in Duchesne County, we're working to make Utah an economic, cultural, and technological leader. Whether you're here for business or pleasure, Duchesne County will welcome you with open arms and invite you to explore all the beauty of the Uinta Mountains. Duchesne County, close enough for business, far enough to get away.
There's no need to travel far to find that perfect family adventure. Welcome to Yuba Reservoir. Boating, fishing, camping, and ATV trails await your next visit. Join us in Juad County. It'll change your family forever.
Welcome back to the County Seat. Our show today is about the impact felt by the closure of the national parks and the plan that the local communities put together to solve the problem. So far, we have exposed the damage caused by the political storm that brought about the closure. Now let's look at the timeline of events that actually brought about the solution.
That's where this started, at the grassroots level by county commissioners and sheriffs saying, this is an emergency, this is a disaster, we need to act. Then the governor got involved and agreed with us that this is an emergency disaster situation.
And that's pretty serious because we have a whole industry with all of the restaurants, hotels, and tours that are going on that count on this as the end of the season. So this is kind of the last hurrah. So not really knowing how long this impasse in the Congress was going to take, we thought we had to take some extraordinary steps.
9 southern Utah counties declared a state of emergency and sent declarations to the desk of the governor. How could the counties justify a park shutdown as an emergency? The answer lies in their charge to protect the health, safety, and welfare of residents. They reasoned that because of the impacts to the welfare of many of the residents that rely on tourism, a state of emergency actually existed. But Commissioner Jim Mattson of Kane County felt that it was more than just health, safety, and welfare.
You could even add one more word to the list, and that is morals. And I think morally what's happening is really wrong to have this placed on the backs of the people. So we felt like we needed to step up as a matter of self-interest, but also to take care of things in a more adequate fashion.
Well, this is a total economic problem. That's why we petitioned the governor for an emergency resolution to be declared an emergency, because it's not just to the individual Park Service employee, but what happens is it's a ripple effect across the state.
93% of Garfield County is federally owned. That means that the federal government has the ability to bankrupt Garfield County, and that's what it's doing with this shutdown.
Prior to the state's offer to fund the reopening of the national parks, the counties discussed whether or not they should have the sheriffs go in and peacefully reopen the parks and then staff them minimally with county resources and assets to keep them open to the public.
We'd go and talk to each superintendent of each park and recreation areas. Our purpose was to let them know that we were to the point where we felt it necessary to go in and open those areas up, because our businesses and the people that were living in our counties were losing so much money.
The closing of the national parks has some sheriffs and county commissioners questioning whether the United States actually has the jurisdiction to close the national parks. It also has them wondering that if the federal government has the authority to close them down, what else can a state do to protect itself?
I think what needs to happen here is we need to get our Attorney General's office and everybody to research what those jurisdictional levels really mean. Because I don't think we have given up the right for us not to go in and handle the parks.
The federal government has ownership, but not the ability to maintain, apparently, in so many aspects, with regard to the wildlife, with regard to the forest, with regard to the parks. Now, that should give us a very strong reason to look very closely at their ability to manage these things.
We want to start working with the legislature on this very issue and start a dialogue along with our own legislators to do something that we could address this issue should it come again in the future. Well, hopefully it won't, but if it does, there needs to be some plan that we have.
We looked at and appropriated money to keep the parks open that long, if that's what it took. Obviously, the federal government has temporarily fixed that. But what we'd like to do in the future is create some kind of process whereby if this happens again, we can be even more nimble. We've got to work as partners in these kinds of solutions. The executive branch, the legislative branch, the local elected officials, all of us have to be able to get together. And that's one of the beauties of state government in a lot of ways, is that it's smaller than the federal government, it's more nimble, it's more able to address those issues in a really rapid time period.
The shutdown of the national parks is just the tip of the iceberg. The impact on tourism sheds light on a much bigger problem: the amount of control the federal government has on lands within the states out here in the West. What kind of an impact will this have on Utah's attempt to transfer public lands to state control? That is a topic we will discuss when we come back on The County Seat.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, SITLA, manages 3.5 million acres of Utah lands with the express purpose of providing financial support to further the education of Utah's students, while promoting local industry, oil and gas, even residential development, all at the same time. Through the careful use of trust lands, the School Land Trust Program will distribute nearly $37 million to Utah's schools this year. The State of Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, building the state's permanent school fund.
Rediscover your sense of adventure. Welcome to San Juan County. Discover the past. A change of place. Utah's San Juan County, where life is elevated.
Welcome back to the county seat. So far today, we have explored the shutdown of the national parks here in the state of Utah and the impacts it's had on the communities, and we've looked at the reopening. We've looked at the process by which the counties in the state work together to loan the money to the federal government to reopen the parks. But it does raise the larger question, the amount of control that federal government has over our daily lives here in the state of Utah by controlling so much land.
Springdale, which is being affected heavily by the closure of Zion National Park, they now understand if the federal government wants to shut down Springdale, all they have to do is close the park. And no local effort, unless we can get response from the federal government, will bring that back. So they're basically at the mercy of the federal government. This is why the public lands issue, which has been fought for years, is going to be, I hope, pushed to the forefront.
Public land policy in this country needs to be addressed. Many different types of problems presently exist that really have to be addressed at some level. This Public Lands Initiative is an effort on the part of the state of Utah to get a dialogue going with the federal government and with the Intermountain states, for that matter, to address these many problems.
I think that what's happening right now with the National Park Service will open some eyes, that it will create the idea that, you know what, the federal government does have control of our life and our livelihood in Washington County, just in the control of lands. And maybe this will wake those that are not watching, those that are not seeing what's going on, maybe this will bring it to the forefront. And yes, I hope that those that see it as a non-issue are now seeing it as a huge issue and will support, because the county commission has recognized that for a number of years and pursued trying to work with the BLM, the Forest Service, the National Park Service, to make sure that we have some say in what goes on public lands in Washington County. And we hope that our constituent recognizes that fact.
And that's been the unfortunate thing to me. It not only were the parks, they tried to shut down all of our public lands. The BLM and the forest as well were included in this effort, and you know, that's something that hasn't happened before.
Well, what hasn't been talked about is the special use permits that weren't being issued during this same time period on BLM lands and on Forest Service lands. The ranchers and the farmers that are out there relying on those kinds of things. The permits for drilling that weren't being issued in the basin. These are on federal lands, and these are the kinds of things that weren't happening either.
The state needs to be in control of our public lands, and we could solve a lot of these issues.
The Transfer of Public Lands Act, or House Bill 148 as it's commonly known, would require the federal government to pass title to the state for all of its holdings by the 31st of December 2014, just barely a year away. It would, however, exclude national parks, national monuments, all of them but one, wilderness areas, defense areas. The exception on the national monuments is Grand Staircase. That is supposed to come back to the state. If you would like to read the bill, it's very interesting reading, and there is a link on our website, thecountyseat.tv. You can go there and get an understanding of what this bill proposes. Stay with us. We'll be back with more of the County Seat in just a minute. When we return, we will be talking to Carl Graham from the Sutherland Institute about the lessons learned from this shutdown and what we can do to prevent it from happening in the future. We'll be back with the County Seat.
If you're looking for the center of the universe, well, good luck. Now, if you're looking for the center of the off-road universe, look no further than Paiute County. Hundreds of miles of trails turn your day of riding into a week, maybe even a month. Heck, a lifetime wouldn't be enough. Take off right from downtown Marysville or Circleville and experience fall colors that rival the most famous destinations in the world. There will never be a better time to ride the Paiute Trail than right now. Explore Paiute County and discover the magic and beauty of the land where the rainbow ends.
Kanab, Base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
Carbon County is typically known for its industry and coal production. But did you know Utah's Castle Country has something for everyone? The motocross track has been acclaimed as the most popular in Utah, with a variety of technical and natural terrain, and it even includes a pee-wee track. Visit castlecountry.com for more information.
Welcome back to the county seat. Our topic today so far has been the closure and reopening of the parks. We have examined how the counties and the state have come together, worked on a plan, involved the federal government to get the parks reopened, albeit at a cost and albeit for a short time. But that does lead to the question, why should this have happened in the first place? There should have been a partnership or mechanism in place in advance of that. Joining us for that conversation is Carl Graham, who's the director of the Center for Self-Government in the West, a part of the Sutherland Institute. Carl, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
Well, a lot of talk has been about the transfer of public lands, and they say, well, if we had control of these lands and owned them in the first place, this wouldn't have been a problem. What would be your answer to that?
Well, the Utah Transfer of Public Lands Act, of course, doesn't include, in fact, it specifically omits national parks. So that act in itself wouldn't have made a difference in the challenges that we're going through with the shutdown and all that's going, all the silliness in Washington, D.C. right now. But that being said, this does illustrate the need for a better partnership. The goal, everybody's goal, is to find the best use for all of these public lands in the state and in the West, including parks. And in the case of parks, I don't think anybody argues that the best use is aesthetic, recreation, things like that. So we should, this would illustrate the need or the desire or an opportunity, I hope, to form a better partnership between the state and local levels of government and the federal government to keep these things open. If that's the goal, if that's everybody's goal, then that's what we should be trying to do and look to the future to have a better way to facilitate this and insulate it from, again, the silliness in Washington.
But that does lead to exactly the point. There, you know, in the early conversations, as I understand from the counties, the park superintendents initially were going, yeah, you know what, great, have your people come in, you know. And then when it came back from Washington, that changed it. So there's still that political directive.
That's right.
And it seems like that the intent was to make everybody ticked off and put them in pain.
It's the Washington Monument Strategy, and by now everybody who listens to the news has heard about that, but the goal is to inflict pain. And so what we need to be able to do is stop that. Look, the $1.7 million to keep the parks open for 10 days, $7 million if that goes through the special session, that's not even a rounding error on the Interior and Agriculture Department budgets, they run most of the public lands. And so there was a conscious decision made to close these parks. The money could have come from somewhere. That decision was made to inflict pain and to raise the level of heat on the people in Washington, D.C. And we shouldn't be used as pawns, and certainly our treasured lands shouldn't be used as pawns in these political battles. And so again, I hope that we have an opportunity here to create a partnership with the federal government on these issues where we can insulate the lands and the people from the political games that are played in D.C.
What would that partnership look like?
It could be as simple as just a contingency plan. We have disaster plans that we put in place that work with FEMA and with state and local governments. They have plans where they each take advantage of their strengths to make up for each other's weaknesses in different circumstances. So look, cities, counties, state, they have a demonstrable record. They have the ability to provide basic safety services, basic emergency services on public lands, on state lands. They do it in cities and towns and counties throughout the state. So they could provide those on federal lands too. Now, you wouldn't get bridges repaired. You wouldn't have people continuing with studies on wildlife and things like that. That would shut down for a while. But we could certainly keep the basic safety and emergency services open that would keep the lands open for the public to use. In the case of an emergency, you could have some sort of a trigger where that kicks off and the state just steps in and does it.
Now, would that be something that would be better to be congressionally mandated as opposed to an administrative, an executive department branch? Because then politics would come back into it, would it not?
That's right. People of goodwill could work it out at the department level, I'm sure. You could do memorandums of agreement. We do those with the federal government at all levels all the time. I'm not sure we're always working with people of goodwill, so it might take, again, a political resolution where Congress steps in and says, make this happen. The states that have the most at stake would be the ones who would have to take the lead in that.
One thing that we haven't really covered in this, but it did come out in the process of the conversation, is that while parks got all the attention, the shutdown of some BLM offices put a halt to a lot of the process work on permits for drilling and things, and that the setback is more than just the days the government's closed. It may actually trigger a restart of the entire process. Does that need to be part of these contingency plans?
I think so too. You know, there are royalties that are paid, there are fees that are paid for these types of permit processing and licensing and all the things that are required to responsibly develop natural resources. But we could turn that into a pay-as-you-go system. The royalties and the registration and the permit, the fees, those could continue to roll in, and those could continue to pay the bills of the folks who process those in more of a pay-as-you-go system. Again, the way the Treasury is set up, the way the budget is set up, that's just not possible, but that could be changed. There's nothing that says it couldn't be.
I guess it is kind of odd that the shutdown took place on areas that actually make money on a daily basis for the federal government.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because the money can't be turned around to pay the expenses, it all has to go into this enormous pot and then filtered and some taken out for overhead and then some of it sent back in Washington, D.C. We're unable to use those resources in their most effective way where they're needed.
Is there something that might be able to be set up that it would just, be in times of emergency like this, just say, okay, well, whatever you get, you keep to run it?
I think that would probably take legislation, and that would be a pretty tough thing to do because everybody would want a piece of that. I think it would probably be easier just to set up some kind of a memorandum of agreement where you step in and hopefully get paid back later.
Well, hopefully the state does get paid back for their investment in this.
The Congress passed a bill that gave back pay to the furloughed federal workers. Why wouldn't that just go to the state in this case?
That would make sense. Well, listen, thank you for joining us on The County Seat. Always your comments are welcome. We look for you to join us each week. Tell your friends about it. Our website, thecountyseat.tv, and check out our Facebook page. We'll see you next week on The County Seat. Carl, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.